This is the first tutorial of 3 tutorials, and it's specifically aimed at anyone that's never used Blender before and never tracked before. It'll run you through the Blender interface and basic information around tracking and getting your initial track points set up. So let's get started and get the 3 things installed that we need to. Blender 2.69 is what I've been running on Windows. Should work with Mac as well. I'm going to run through how to install the zip installer. You can use the Windows one if you want, but it's really easy to do the zip one. Hitfilm 2 Ultimate, and you can try it for free if you don't own it. I'm not going to run through that. It's a standard Windows install, nothing special. And then you can download the script from the Hitfilm community, and I'm going to run through that later. So once we've done the tracking, then I'll show you how to download the scripts, and I'll have a link if you want to just jump straight to that piece in the video. So all the links for these 3 will also be in the description. So let's download Blender. So just click on the link, download it, and I'll skip to where we've downloaded it already and show you what to do next. Okay, so you downloaded Blender in just the standard download area. I'd recommend just unzipping it here because I like to just pop it into program files. You need administrator rights to copy it there, so you'll most likely run into problems trying to extract it there directly. There's usually a couple of folders in here. Okay, so we'll just copy the folder. I'm going to cut it, and then I'm going to find my program files. So you can create a folder here. You see I've already got one called Blender Foundation. The nice thing is you can run as many as you like in parallel. So I've already got a few versions here. I'll just create a new one. There we go. And then we're just going to paste it in here. As you can see here, this is where it says you need admin. So just continue with that. That was quick. Okay, so we've got it in here, and then you've got Blender EXE. So you can just right click on that and then send to desktop. Create shortcut. Job done. Now just double click on that. That's just firing up in my other window. Move it across, and there you go. Blender is all installed and ready to go. So next we're going to go on and we're going to do some tracking. I've reset my Blender back to factory settings, so this is as it comes out of the tin. So let's get started. So the first thing, there's a few options. So we're just going to concentrate on doing the tracking with a view to doing camera solve. Obviously you can do loads more in Blender. If you click up here, and I'm going to sort of click and try and use menus. There are obviously shortcuts for all of this stuff. I call them out as I go along where they're convenient. You can just work that out for yourself, but I just do menus for the bulk of it just so you can get a feel for where everything is. So you can actually choose a screen layout for motion tracking here. But for the camera solve and things like that, I prefer just to start from the sort of movie clip editor and then sort of build it up as we need it. So that's what we're going to do. So I'm just going to pop this back to the default display. You can obviously create your own displays as you go along. So down the bottom here you have this little cube, and if you click on this, then it gives you loads of different options, and each of these little bits in the corners, they'll just load up whatever you want in there. So yeah, you can have duplicates of the windows, you can create more windows. I'll show you how to do that later. So it's quite cool. It takes a little bit getting used to, but it's actually really quite good fun to use. So go in here and we load movie clip editor. There we go. So middle mouse wheel, scroll in, scroll out for zoom, hold the middle button down for move. Okay. So we're going to load the clip in here. So click on open. And now I went out yesterday and shot some footage specially. So let's get this in. I'm so going to regret this particular shot, but hopefully it will work out by the time I spent recording this. So I've created an image sequence for it. You can work with movie clips as well in Blender. I just prefer image sequences if you're going to edit it or anything like that. So let's scroll out a bit. So it's a scene of some woods, and the first thing you need to do as you go in is set up your frames. It defaults to 250 frames. Now, by a pure coincidence, I actually managed to edit this piece of footage to 250 frames. That doesn't normally happen. Usually you'll need to adjust this. So this is your timeline, which you can scroll along. You can just hold your mouse cursor down, scroll left and right. If you hold your middle wheel down, you can actually scroll the whole timeline, move it left and right, and then scroll in and out, compresses and expands it. So you can go into these grey areas. If you move your clip was longer, you'll see them in here. So you just find the last frames. So say we had 800 frames, we can change the end here to 800. And we'd about scroll in a bit, bring it down. Okay, and now you see the whole timeline. And again, if you need to make it shorter. So let's put that back to 250. That's what we've got, luckily. Now we have the movie clip in. There's a few things we need to set up to make our life easier, and to make sure that when we come to export it later, the correct information is there. First one you'll see on the right hand side here is frame rate. Because it's an image sequence, it doesn't know what the FPS is. I shot this at 25, so I'm just going to change that to 25. It's really important you remember to do this. It doesn't really matter for the tracking, but do it up front because this is what gets exported to Hitfilm. And if you get it wrong, then your timing is going to be out and all the calculations will be wrong. Just remember to do that. The next thing is you see these little purple things that are on just above the timeline. This has happened just where I've been scrubbing through. You see if I scrub through slowly, they start to fill in. So this is Blender caching it. So yeah, it took me a while to work out what on earth they were doing. So the next thing we're going to do to make life a bit quicker when we're tracking is we're going to cache this as much as we can in memory and prefetch all the frames. So we just need to do a little setup to make that happen. So go to File and then User Preferences. Nope, just popped up on the other screen there. And then System. Scroll down. So there's two things here for the sequencer and the clip editor. One's prefetch frames. So that's how many frames it's going to sort of load into memory, and then it will just keep loading everyone. Obviously unlikely to get a whole movie in there if it's a big movie. Actually, for what we've got, 250 frames, you could easily do it. I'm going to pop that at 300. That's plenty, so we'll be able to cache the whole thing to scroll through it. Then the memory cache limit, so it's 1024 meg. I'm going to stick it up to 3000. Plenty for what we're doing. Save that. Okay, so they're all saved. Next thing, actually what I'm going to do now is just do file save, because just to keep it going, let's just save over the top of this one I did earlier. There we go. Okay, so the next thing we want to do now is we're going to prefetch all these frames. You can just press P, or in the track you've got prefetch frames. Press in, you see here it's going through and it's prefetching them all. Doesn't take long. There we go. So now we can scrub through nicely. This might be a little bit jerky just because of the recording software, but it goes through nice and smooth. So you can see it's quite a challenging shot. The next thing I'm going to run through is just what to think about actually when we approach this shot. Before we do any tracking, we need to understand what the shot is actually doing. And because I shot this specifically to be tracked as well, you'll see that each frame is actually pretty sharp. So I filmed this at 25 frames a second. Usually I would have filmed that with a shutter speed of 50 to get the sort of appropriate motion blur on. But because I knew I was going to track this, I actually upped the shutter speed up to 250, because we were shooting this for a reason, and that's to try and drop a composite shot in there after we've done the camera match. So yeah, I'm more than happy just to add the motion blur afterwards, especially for a shot like this where we haven't got people's limbs moving at different speeds and things like that. It's actually going to be fairly trivial to add motion, appropriate amount of motion blur to it afterwards. So I'd rather do that and have an easier track, than do it the other way around. You can track through the blur. It does do quite a good job of that. But why make life difficult for you? Like I say, this is a planned shot. It's not something we've casually just gone out and then tried to retrospectively fit something in. So it's always worth thinking ahead. Now, if you've got lots of people in the scene or sort of fast action and things like that, then actually it may outweigh. You may be better off having the appropriate blur in there, and then tracking through it. But for this shot, I decided that was the way to go. A conscious choice to try and make life easy. So as you go through the shot, before we put down any track markers or anything, you need to see what it's doing. So instantly we can see here, we've got it's handheld, we've got pan, tilt, zoom, well there's no zoom, sorry, perspective shift. Yeah, if you look behind this tree here, did this on purpose, got parallax shift going on. Okay, so every sort of camera movement you can imagine going on in this shot. So straight away that leads us, that helps us decide how we're going to track it. The other thing is it's a pan shot, okay, from right to left, and you can see here on the right hand side that we've got some trees in this shot that start in it and aren't in it. So the actual pan covers more than one frame's worth of data. So in Blender, well, I think in most tracking programs, you'd have to have some sort of overlap to do the whole pan. So when we're tracking this, I'm going to be starting from the middle and tracking backwards and forwards out from the middle to make sure I get a good overlap. And when we start laying down points, which we'll start in a sec, Blender likes a minimum of 8 points to try and solve a camera. That's for a very simple shot. It's never going to solve this. We need a lot more points than that. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. So next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you how to set up the track points to get a successful track in this particular type of shot. So we're going to look now at setting up some markers. On the left hand side, I tend to, there's one, you've got a set of options really around defining the markers and sort of working with them. And then on the right hand side, there tends to be more information about what markers you've laid down. There's obviously a slight crossover, that's how I tend to think about it. If either of those sides are missing, press T for the left hand side menu and N for the right hand. So if you're not seeing what you expect, try knocking those keys, see if it brings up anything useful. That usually works for me. So we'll look at the track settings here. So there's a set of defaults, predefined ones here. Okay, and I think, yeah, that's one I set up earlier. I'll show you how to set up this one. So if you look at the options, it defaults to location, which is sort of a very basic match. So yeah, it's not expecting much in the way of rotation and scale change. I'll just try and look for the same pattern in the next frame. Then you've got rotation, scale, rotation and scale. We're going perspective. Now, in this scene, there's definitely a perspective shift as well. But I've just not had a lot of success with this perspective tracker. So Affine is the one that I'm using, stands for affinity. So it's actually looking to match the pattern as accurate as it can, but it also takes into account sort of skew as well as sort of rotation and all the other movements. So for this type of scene, it works really well, really sticks nicely. Pre-pass, I've not really done anything with it. It's on by default, I've left it on. Normalize, I select. So if you've got different light intensities in the scene, then that tries to normalize those, adds a bit more to the CPU. I think it just helps get a good match, especially so as the camera angle is changing, you're potentially getting light variation, so it all helps. Use mask, so you can actually draw sort of masks and block out particular areas. We don't need that in this. Correlation defaults to 0.75. I like to have this a bit higher, so this is just really saying, looking between each frame, how accurate does it need to be before I bail? So the higher the value, the more data it has to match. So this just means that it stops earlier. I'd rather have that than have sort of a road track just running off. I'd rather it stopped and then had a look at why it stopped. So I have that a little bit higher. Frames limit, I've not done anything with. I've left that at 0, which is the default. And then margin, I've set at 10. So that's the number of pixels from the boundary of the image where it will stop tracking. So I find that quite helpful. If you leave it at 0, sometimes they squish up on the edge and just sit there, and they can throw your results out. This one's important, match. By default, it's on keyframe. So just going from one frame to the next frame. I'll go for previous frame. It really helps if you've got a lot of motion blur. I don't know why you wouldn't have it as default. It just works really well. So once you've got it set up how you like. Oh, the pattern size, I've increased this. I think the default's 15. I'll show you what that looks like in a sec. So you can add the plus and then save your preset. I've already called this one a fine track. So that's all set up. So to pop a track down, And we can go over here, so if you made a middle mouse button, you can hold it and then scroll wheel and scroll in. So we can find something to track. So let's have a look here. That's good. So you can either do add marker and then drop it on. I'll show you how to move them around in a sec. Or I prefer hold down Control and then left click on the mouse, pop, and it pops it in. Okay. So this is the pattern size. So 30 is the area it's actually going to try and match. What it's not showing you here is the search area. So if you go on the right hand side, you can see there's a little tab here that says search. Okay, so this is the area it's going to search. I've kept it sort of quite conservative with this because there's not a lot of speed. If you've got a lot of speed, then each frame, you need to make sure that search area lands in the appropriate area, because if it's too small, you're going to lose track all the time. If it's too big, you get too much CPU overhead. So it's just a compromise. This works nicely. If you did want to pick this up and move it around, you press G for grab, and you can move it around, and then left click to drop it again, or escape if you just want to pop it back in the same place. If you want to rotate it, you press R, and you can rotate the area, and I'm just going to hit escape to pop that back, and S, scale. If you want to scale it like that, and again I'm going to hit escape. And then you can drag on the individual points. So in this one actually I'm going to change it, that's quite near the boundary of the tree where that light is, so I'm just going to pull it in a bit. That's fine, and then you've got these controls here for scale as well, moving it around, and same for search box. Okay, so that's all fairly self-explanatory. And if you look on this right hand side, somewhere down here we should have some track settings. Actually, while we're here, so you can see here that this is track. This is called Imaginative View track. You'll get track 1, 2, and 3. You can name them if you want, but you're going to have hundreds of them, so I wouldn't bother. And this is a duplicate of what we've got over here. And then speed is how quick it'll do. I'm going to set this to quarter for now, just so it doesn't rush off too quickly when we're just doing a small amount of tracking. Yeah, so that's what we've got there. And where are we? Actually, popping back over here, one piece that is good is here, copy active track. So if you have set up one that actually you think this is a better, you've tweaked one over here and made it look better, you can do copy from active track, and it will copy. You see it's changed the sizes over here. So it'll copy back any changes you've made to that active track. That's quite worth knowing. I'm just going to do Control Z and undo that. And then if you look here, this is the little window that shows you what it's actually hanging on to. That's really important to keep an eye on. That's probably the best place. Well, there's two things to keep an eye on when you're watching the track. There's that, to see if it stays in place. And I like to keep an eye on the box, because there will be a little bit of skew in the box as this moves forward. If there's because of the way the camera's moving. If there's a lot, it's a pretty good sign that it's starting to lose the track. So yeah, so I think we're almost ready to go. So the first thing we're going to do here is we're going to track forwards from this point, so we're halfway through the frame. So here we've got some commands, and you can see the shortcuts pop up underneath it. It's quite good. So this is auto track forwards, and this will do step by step, and these ones are back. So for now we're going to do step by step, so we'll just click that and it will track forward one frame. There you go. So I've actually got this set up on my Shuttle Pro, so I use that rather than clicking it to do the shortcut key, and we'll just go forwards as we go. So it's important to keep an eye over here. Look at that, that's absolutely rock solid with that track. Okay, so I've got a good level of confidence this is going to run off okay. It's no bother changing it if it doesn't. So I'm going to hit track forwards and let it auto track out, and just keep an eye on that. So usually it goes faster than this. I've just got it. Now you see it's shooting off to the right there. Let's just stop that down here. So obviously the screen is moving with it, which means you're continually adjusting the screen. So there's a good little trick down here. Now I always look over this. Here we go. Lock to selection. So that will pop it into the middle. So that will keep that centered in the screen. So we'll just track forward now, and you can see it moves the image around. It makes it a lot easier to track. Just scroll up here. Just keep an eye on this and make sure. Okay, and there we go. So we're not that's interesting. So we've not finished the whole frame and it's bailed on the track. There. So it's tempting to grab it and reposition it and try and get it back on the point where you were. I really wouldn't recommend doing that. The chance of you actually getting that right are minimal. You're better off actually just changing the area around the tracks. It's more likely it's probably where this colour's changed in the right hand side here. So let's just bring this in, and you can just a bit of trial and error on this. It really doesn't matter. So we're not changing the point in the middle, we're just changing actually the bit we're telling it to match. And then we'll do a manual track forward. There you go, back on track. Okay, and then we can finish off that frame. That's a much better way of doing it. If you try and reposition it manually, you're never going to put it in the right place. And it's usually just where there's a bit of colour variation coming or something like that. So we're going to go back to the middle. Let me go down here. Now we're going to track backwards. I'm just going to hit auto track. Moving along. I've got some funky camera movement going on there. Oh, that's nice. If this actually works, it'd be a miracle. But yeah, we're going to give it the best shot. Need a challenge. Keeping your eye on here. It's locked on solid. There we go. And there we go. That's our first track. So you can do multiple tracks as well. So let's say, so we ignore that one for a sec. So let's drop a couple more in. So we've got one up here, put one here. And you see the screen just jumped to put it in the middle, and I'll do one underneath it as well. You can set as many of these up as you like, but the more you put up, the more CPU it takes. So if you held down Shift and then right click on the mouse, you can see now it's got those two selected. So if I track, I'm just going to do auto track. Actually, look, I'm going to change this first. See, it's got that white in the corner there. You've got to keep an eye out for that sort of stuff. Alright, that's going to slip. I can pretty much know that already, so I'm not even going to try. I'm going to bring that in a bit, tell it to match that. This one's probably a little bit near the edge as well. Okay, so I'm just going to auto track that forwards and just keep an eye on them. Now you only see the top one in there, so I'm just going to keep an eye on the shape as well. So you get like a little bit of skew going on, but that's fine. See, that's lost it there. And we'll come back to that one in a sec. It's probably because it got hit the frame boundary. And this one's sitting there nicely. Right, it's like, okay, that was a classic at the end there. So let's just scroll back a few on this. So you can see here now that started to deform. Now the key here as well is if you look at them, I mean, these should pretty much match the same sorts of area, directions, and you can see here it suddenly drops away. So if you leave it in there, it's going to give you a bad track. Now what's actually happened here, and this shows how subtle you need to be, I think, fine, is that this looks like there's actually a branch. I didn't notice. Yeah, and it's probably just got to the point where it's wiggling. So yeah, so it's hit the frame, it's hit the boundary up there, then it's tried to jump, it's found another. So I'm just going to pull this in down a little bit. Now you don't have to, once you've got a lot of tracks, you're not going to spend this much detail on them all, but I just like to get a good few in. So I'm going to try and manually track that forward. There you go. Okay, now it's hit the edge of the frame, so that's fine. But it finished off nicely there. And this is where we set that 10 pixels on the edge. So there you go. That's what's supposed to happen. And then, okay, so we'll watch this. And then it's left this on here, so you can clear it after. And that just clears the rest of the track out. And just leave it off, don't try and align it. We're going to have plenty of other tracks in there. So come back to this one that we did earlier. Now this legitimately dropped off again. It kept a good track and then dropped off because it hit the top of the frame. That's what it's supposed to do. Okay, there's no point trying to do anything with it. That's fine. So let's just track them backwards. Again, just keeping an eye on the shapes. Right, let's just stop that pop down. So rather than hitting the side, it bounced down. And again, you can see the difference here. So I'm just going to clear everything before on that one. I'm actually going to deselect that. I'm just going to leave that one as it is. I'm going to track this one here back out. And yeah, because it just hit the top of the frame there. That's fine. It's going to happen. that's holding on nicely. So you're starting to get an idea of some of the problems that you're going to come into as you go along. Okay, lovely. So I'm just going to turn off lock to selection. L is the shortcut for that. Okay, so I can position the screen back out again. So scroll to the middle and you can start to see. So you can visually see that these are matching. This is what you'd expect to see. You'd expect to see similar sorts of shape. You will get differences if stuff's different. Yeah, you've got parallax going on in the background and they're further away. But if they're in the same plane, like these are on the edge of this tree, they should all match. Now, the one thing on this right hand side is really probably tempting to do is this detect features piece. So let me just scroll into this. And what that will do is automatically detect the features in the screen. So let's click this. All right, that's just going to be abject misery trying to sort that out if you try and track all those together. You can track, I try and track 8 to 10 at a time when we get going. That's just ridiculous, and they're all just going to fall off, drop off. And you're going to be hours trying to sort it out. I really wouldn't bother doing that. It just doesn't help. Okay, so I've run through the basics now. Next thing to do is really just crack on. There's just need to get loads of it tracked. I say 8 is the bare minimum. We're going to have a lot more on this scene. So I'd like to try and break it into sections. You can do however it works for you. So what I'll probably do is finish off this tree. So I'm going to do that, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go away and just track everything else, and then come back, because it's going to be very dull for you watching me do that. I'll just run this last one. Those trees are classic. If you see in the middle here, these branches, okay, the branches, this tree in the front, and as you can see, as it moves across there, I'm just going to put my cursor over it. All right, let's see how it moves across. If you try and track over that, it's just going to go. So you need to really understand what you're looking at. The rest of the tree here looks okay. So I'm going to track the rest of this tree in, and then what I'll do afterwards, I'll track these front areas, the trees on the right, and I'll just start to build up a picture. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to track all the obvious stuff, and then I'm going to, so let's do this tree now, and then while it's tracking, I'll talk. So do Control and right click. Okay, I'm going to pop a lot in there, and then Shift, and then right click. That. And then auto track forwards. Okay, and that's going away. So I like to do it like this, because then I can just check each group of tracks as I go. Oh, you see that little grey frame there? That's a little glitch with Blender. We'll sort that out in a sec as well. It's a very annoying glitch when you do multiple tracking. Let's track through, and that's all tracked through fine. So I'm being a little less precious about these now. I'm keeping an eye on them if there's anything obvious, but when we come back, I'll show you how to look at it in a more sort of holistic way. With a graph and things like that. So we're going to track back. See that top one there squished, and we've got the little frame bug going on as well. Okay, so I'm going to come back and sort that top one out. The rest of them are looking okay. I'm just going to let it track out. And that's, if you look, that's where that top one's hit that bit of trees come across. The thing I told you not to do to start with. I obviously didn't go far enough back. There you go, that's exactly what happens. Yeah, see? So, because that's interacting with that branch, let's just zoom in there. See where that comes in. Hit L to lock to selection. So I'm going to deselect the rest because they attract in, okay. Lock this in the middle. Yeah, look, you see where that branch comes across? Classic. So I'm just going to clear everything from before there. I'm not even going to bother, because we've got a lot of good stuff on the other one. That's a really good demonstration there though, of what happens. Yeah, so one really annoying thing I found with this, and I've not found on the forums yet, how to sort it out, is you see that little grey blip. Let's find it. Just scroll through. Seeing as this is a live demo. There. Okay, for some reason it drops, it's a visual thing, but it just drops the frames out. So the way to fix that is to clip and then reload clip. Okay, so I'll reload all the frames, and then you can have to prefetch everything again. You don't have to prefetch, but it just makes everything so much faster. Yeah, and that fixes it. If it happens a lot, then just stop Blender, and go again. I wouldn't leave them in there just in case. This is interesting. So this white one in the top here as well. Okay, I'm just going to scroll up. So that's just where I've got it selected, and it's no longer tracking. See, it's not got the spot in the middle. If it hasn't got a dot in the middle, it just means I've selected it and it's not tracking. If I track one of the other ones, you'll see it's red. So that's just normal. Just means we've stopped the tracking. Okay, I'm just going to do one more track while we're here, and then I'm going to go away and track everything inside. So I'm going to track this foreground. It's very important to try and get different aspect ratio. So I'm going to go for the foreground next. So some nice stuff in the middle here, especially because this is where we're going to try and drop something. So I'm just going to turn lock to location offset to jump around. So I'm going to stick a load in here. 1, 2, 3. Okay, and then shift and right click to get them all. If you hit A and then A again, it will select everything, but that's obviously everything on the screen. Doesn't really help. Track this forward. So I'm just going to. It seems to be when you do large multiple tracks like this. I'm just going to stop that. Hit L so it keeps it in the middle. I'm sure somebody will tell me why that happens. So you can see there, that's got nudged off the screen. I'm going to have to sort that one out. They look like it stopped okay. Yeah, look, there's a bit of a mess going on, a bit of a pile up in the corner there. So I'll have to go back through and sort those out. Same as we did with the tree. I won't bore you with that. Let's just track back the other way. Track backwards. And there's one I missed from the selection as well. That seems to be holding okay. And these are all shutting down all right. And again, I'll go in and make sure I tidy up the ends on those. Okay, so there we go. So I shall leave you now, and then I'm going to sit down and track the rest of this scene, and then I'll come back and we'll talk through how to set it up, do the solve, and all the rest of that stuff. So I'll speak to you soon. I hope you enjoyed the speeded up section there. That took me about half an hour, exactly half an hour to do that. So it gives you an idea of the time involved with this. I'm relatively new to doing this, and maybe quicker ways to do it as we find as we go on. So once you've finished, you should end up with something like this. I'm just going to play this through now. So go through, so you can get an idea. So I mean, I've had success when I've got this sort of volume of good track going on. So there's quite a few points there, but it's not horrendous, and I've really concentrated on getting it over the areas where I'm intending to put it, which is part of these logs here. I'm sort of thinking I'm going to mask out the tree that's doing the parallax shift, because I'm going to give it a real depth, feel of depth when we go through there. Yeah, so that's where we're at. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start off the next tutorial, where I'm going to do how to set up the camera, because that's very important to get a correct solve. So we'll set up the camera data, then we'll do a solve. I'll show you some of the common issues around that, show you how to just check that all these tracks are actually okay, and actually resolve it so we get a nice low solve error. And then we shall load the Blender to Hitfilm export script, and we'll pop it into Hitfilm and see what we get. So I'll speak to you soon.